Humans walk into the wilderness with high-powered rifles, thermal scopes, and layered camouflage. We carry this quiet, unspoken confidence that we sit securely at the absolute top of the food chain. Take a lone archer heading into the freezing Pennsylvania woods before dawn, or a grandfather and grandson settling into their family hunting blind in Texas, or three friends hauling rifles deep into a mountain range for a weekend trip. They are all armed, and they are all perfectly comfortable in their isolation. Every mile of dirt road and thick brush puts more space between a hunter and the nearest ambulance, deputy, or neighbor. Deep in the backcountry, the environment is defined entirely by the immediate surroundings, far removed from the protective reach of any town. For that archer in Pennsylvania, the shift begins about an hour after sunrise. Sitting 20 feet up a tree, he spots a weathered, cheap ladder stand 60 yards away. He knows the property well, and that stand was missing the weekend prior. What bothers him more is the fresh snow. A single line of footprints leads straight from the deep woods to the base of the stand, and stops. There are no tracks leading away. 1,000 miles away in Texas, that grandfather and grandson experience a similar creeping dread, spotting a figure peering from the tree line a mile and a half out, watching them. And for those three friends in the mountains, the quiet is broken on their very first night, when an echoing, human-like scream rings out from the pitch-black woods. In these moments, the high-powered gear and heavy rifles begin to feel like dead weight. The hunter is no longer calculating a shot or tracking a deer. They are scanning the trees for a shape they cannot identify, waiting to see if the eyes they felt on them are still there. A gun only works if you understand what you are shooting at. When the Pennsylvania archer spots movement near that mysterious ladder stand, a man steps out from behind an oak tree. He wears a dirty gray hoodie and dark pants, gripping a yellow and black screwdriver. He ignores the hunter's weapon entirely. He just stares with a teeth-baring half-smile. As the archer flees the property, he discovers the stalker's twisted markers along his escape route: a dead squirrel, a dead rabbit, and a crow, each hung by wires over rough circles drawn into the snow. The true violation happens near his truck. The hunter finds his own backpack leaning against a tree, the bag he left 20 feet up in his stand. It is unzipped. His extra arrows, flashlight, and knife are laid out perfectly in the snow. The stalker climbed his tree stand, took inventory of his belongings, and left them behind as a message. Faced with the unknown, the human instinct is to escalate force. When the Texas grandfather and grandson return from town to find their freshly hung deer covered in massive bite and claw marks, they grab their ARs and flashlights, heading out into the dark to reclaim their territory. They find a coyote and shoot it, but the gunshot doesn't bring quiet. Instead, it triggers an ear-splitting, inhuman scream from the distant brush. Panic overrides their firepower. They sprint back toward the cabin, hearing intense, heavy footsteps and massive breaths right on their heels in the dark. Even with their rifles firing through the wood into the dark, the slamming against the door doesn't stop. The lead passing through the cabin wall doesn't end the screeching. It only highlights how little control they actually have over the entity on the other side. Against a psychological threat or an unidentified biological entity, conventional firepower becomes a desperate, largely ineffective gesture of defense. If raw firepower fails, the next logical defense is establishing a perimeter. For the three friends hunting in the mountains, a roaring campfire and loud voices are supposed to create a safe boundary against the terrifying screams echoing through the valley. On their second night, the scream returns, actively moving toward their camp. One of the men, Kyle, grabs his rifle, fires multiple warning shots up into the air, and starts yelling into the woods. He is trying to project size and intimidation to scare off the threat. The response is immediate. The entity ignores the gunshots. Their courage fails. The next scream erupts from just a few yards away, breaching the edge of their firelight. Realizing the fire is acting as a spotlight rather than a shield, the men rush to kill the flames, plunging themselves into absolute darkness. They sit there in the pitch black, gripping their rifles in absolute silence. They listen as heavy, sprinting footsteps tear through their campsite. Something solid brushes past their tent, dragging an object roughly along the thin fabric. A deafening scream explodes right in the middle of their camp. The men fire blindly through the roof of the tent, and the footsteps finally sprint off into the night. They spend the remaining hours huddled together, with white-knuckled grips on their weapons, waiting for the sun to make the woods feel safe enough to run. When the sun finally rises, the woods look the same as they did the day before, but the hunters don't. For many who experience these encounters, the wilderness stops being a place of recreation and becomes a landscape they refuse to enter alone. 2 weeks after the Pennsylvania archer fled the property, game wardens ventured deep into those same woods. They found a makeshift tarp shelter filled with rusted hunting gear and scattered animal bones. The hunter had been spotted, tracked, and studied by someone living in the brush. In Texas, local deputies arrive the morning after the creature attacks the cabin. They see the splintered wood and the mutilated deer, but they have no answers. The family locks up the multi-generational cabin and never returns. Those men escaped with their lives, but for the 3 mountain campers, the physical escape brings a different kind of weight. They spend their days wondering what made those deafening screams, and whether the threat was really a threat at all. The narrator's nights are now defined by a recurring image, a woman standing between the pines, pleading for help. He lives with the silence that followed their decision to stay in the tent and keep the doors zipped shut, while someone, or something, screamed in the dark. We venture into the deep woods, believing our technology makes us untouchable, but the wilderness can strip that away in an instant. Out there, past the tree line and the city lights, we are just another vulnerable creature sitting in the dark.